Last week, in part 1 of our series, we talked about the history of Pontefract, a history that may have led to the incidents of strange happenings at 30 East Drive, Pontefract. We met the Pritchard family, who lived in the house at the time that paranormal events began to occur, as well as a few of their relatives and neighbors, many of whom witnessed the first occurrences of unexplainable events at the Pritchard home on a Thursday in August of 1966. We detailed the flurry of activity that occurred on that day, activity that began suddenly with a strange chill, escalated through a series of telekinetic displays, and ended with the seemingly sentient slashing of Joe and Jean's wedding photo. Then, a few days later, we saw the as-of-yet unseen entity behind the events give one final display of power and presence before growing once again silent for the next 2 years. Tonight, in part 2 of our series, we will come back to 30 East Drive and the Pritchard family, whose 2 years of paranormal-free peace was about to come to an abrupt and dramatic end. Hello there, friends, and welcome to the Paranatural Podcast. My name is Ben.
And I'm Bob Seeger.
Holy shit! Hey.
Sing for us, Bob! Oh, wait, he can't, because he's really Jake. And tonight, what we have for you is part 2 of our 3-part series on the Black Monk of Pontefract. Jacob, how you doing tonight, buddy?
I sure am. I'm enjoying this Aurora Bong Among Us.
Yeah, Jake's playing with the Zoom settings. He showed up as an alien on my screen at first today.
That was just to turn you on.
It worked.
How are you, Ben?
Oh, we're doing pretty good, buddy. We're doing pretty good. Got to take a trip to the zoo yesterday.
A zoo?
Yeah, to the zoo, the Toledo Zoo.
Oh, so not a crypto zoo?
No, unfortunately, no. The old lady won't let me take the kids to one of those yet. We're working on it, though.
Soon.
Very, very soon. So I don't have anything for the show to take care of. We didn't get any new Patreon members or voicemails or anything. Sad face.
Come on, guys.
Yeah, I know. But
Pull your own weight.
But that's fine. That's fine. You know, even if you don't want to, support us on Patreon or whatever, all we can really ask is that if you enjoy the show, you share the show with a friend. That we more than appreciate.
And give you a big-ass guilt trip.
Not on purpose.
Oh, I will.
But yeah, if you do enjoy the show, please share the show with a friend.
Or 6 friends. How many?
Or 6 or 12 or, just send it to everybody in your contacts.
Do it.
You know, even that one boss whose number you still got and you don't know why, but you keep forgetting to delete it, send it to that guy too.
Lena.
So anyway, Jake, unless you got anything to add, we'll just get right into this thing.
No. I'll save my guilt tripping for later. I'm too excited for the story.
All right, beautiful. We got some fun stuff for this one tonight. Fred gets real funny here.
Good.
So we'll just dive right into it. Like I mentioned, it's about 2 years after the events of part 1. And if you haven't listened to part 1, go back and listen to part 1, then come back. We'll still be here. And it all kicked off again when Jean Pritchard decided to redecorate Diane's room. Now, if you spend a lot of time looking into haunted locations, what you will see is a pattern where redecorating and remodeling and stuff kicks the spookies into high gear. It just happens a lot. And during her redecorating phase one afternoon, she was taking a break and was having tea with her mother, Grandma Sarah, who, according to Colin Wilson's book, visited quite frequently and spent most weekends at the Pritchard house. Grandma Sarah once again began talking about the haunting, which was a subject that Joe for sure and maybe Jean had grown really tired of hearing about. On this particular day, she told Jean that she had been hearing noises. Jean replied that she hadn't heard anything, and that she was in the house pretty much all the time, so they just kind of blew Grandma Sarah off. And Grandma Sarah asked, "Didn't you hear something just then?" Which Jean replied that she had not. But I think she was telling a fib, because she got up and went out into the hallway, like right then, and there at the foot of the stairs was a bedspread from her bed. Now, Jean knew it hadn't been there 10 minutes earlier, because she would have seen it when she came down to make the tea, and nobody had been out in the hall since then. But she takes the bedspread back upstairs, puts it back on the bed, and gets back to work in Diane's bedroom. A few moments later, there's a loud crash. She checks it out and sees the bedspread from Philip's bed was laying in the hallway, and that a bunch of plants had been turned over and there was dirt everywhere. Poor Grandma Sarah was freaked to the point of tears and said to her daughter, "I told you, it's starting again." That night, Jean was having trouble sleeping. So she gets out of bed and goes out onto the landing. Now, the first thing she notices is that it had been overly warm and stuffy in her bedroom, which was part of why she couldn't sleep. But out on the landing, there was a chill. Then, by the dim lighting that came from a streetlight outside, she notices something moving in the corner of the landing. Something swaying and rustling in the dark.
What the fuck was that?
Jean flips on the light, and something that she would later identify as a paintbrush flew past her face, missing her by only a fraction of an inch. Immediately after the paintbrush flies past her face, the paste bucket goes flying too. It smashes into the wall opposite of where Jean is standing, and paste goes all over the carpet.
Dick.
Right. That's going to be hard to clean up.
Yeah.
And Jean Pritchard, according to Colin Wilson, kept a tidy home. So she's going to be pissed off. Now, finally, Jean identifies what it was that she had seen moving in the half-light. It was a long strip of wallpaper, which had been lying rolled up on the floor. But now it was standing up on end and swaying back and forth in imitation of a cobra.
Creepy.
Right. Jean, for her part, was having none of that nonsense and made a grab for the snake-imitating wallpaper. She missed, but the strip fluttered to the floor anyway. At the same moment, the carpet sweeper flies up into the air, and it starts swinging around as if an invisible giant is using it for a club. Now, what Jean did next is probably the smartest thing a person can do if an invisible assailant is swinging a sweeper. She dropped down on all fours and scrambled her ass back into her bedroom. She gets inside the bedroom and closes the door just in time to avoid getting hit by a roll of wallpaper that, she slammed the door and it, hit the door just as she closed it. And she starts screaming her full fucking head off. So Joe pops up, out of his sleep, and his first question is, "What's happening?" Which is probably fair if somebody's just screaming. And he goes out onto the landing to see. Of course, Philip and Diane heard their mom screaming, and they pop out of their rooms too. And as they're standing there in their jams, paintbrushes and shit just start flying around on the landing. One of the brushes narrowly misses Diane's head, and another one hits her on the shoulder. Now, the ever-helpful Joe yells to his daughter, "Don't stand there," which, duh, but she tells him that it didn't hurt, and she's obviously surprised by this, because apparently the shit was flying around the room so fast that it looked like, even though it was just a paintbrush, it should have seriously injured her. You get enough speed going behind something, I don't care what it is, it'll hurt.
Right.
That's the science behind a bullet. But instead of actually doing any harm, it just kind of tapped her shoulder and fell on the floor. It was no big deal. Then the entity moved into Diane's bedroom. Now, okay, Pop quiz. Jacob, do you know what a pelmet is?
No.
I didn't either until I read it, and then I had to look it up. So I'll explain what it is. A pelmet is something that is attached above windows in order to hide like curtain rods and shit. And what the fuck is going on in back there?
That's what I've been wondering.
I got a black monk. Anyway, I don't know what it is. Probably people moving shit. So anyway, a pelmet is attached above windows to hide like curtain rods and shit. It's like a valance, but not made of fabric. And yes, I also learned researching what a pelmet is, what a valance is, and I have no idea if I'm actually even saying it correctly. Anyway, this pelmet was made out of wood, okay? And Philip is looking through the door into Diane's bedroom when he sees this wooden pelmet, which was held on by 2-inch screws, get ripped off the wall and go flying out the window. So, yeah, 2-inch screws are not easy to just pull out, but he just yanked them out and threw it out the window. And they actually heard it hit the sidewalk below. Joe slams the bedroom door shut, and they're all standing there just listening to bangs and thumps and shit coming from inside Diane's room. And Diane, who is apparently not the brightest of children, reaches for the fucking doorknob to open the door. And Joe stops her by yelling, "Don't touch it." And she pulls her hand back. And as if in response to Diane removing her hand, there is a loud thump on the other side of the door. Diane slept in her parents' room that night because obviously hers is occupied. And despite it being an actually pointless gesture, they did in fact lock the door, which at least made them feel better. So that was how the entity at 30 East Drive, Pontefract, made his entrance after 2 years of being gone by shit-whipping paintbrushes around the fucking landing.
You got some good sleep.
I mean, he was well rested.
Yeah.
Now, unlike his first appearance, though, this time he did not go away immediately after his big display. In fact, he stuck around for quite some time. Long enough that the Pritchard family sort of got used to his shenanigans, and even though the paper had dubbed the entity Mr. Nobody, after word of the first incident came out, Gene eventually began calling him Fred.
Scary name.
Well, you know, it's kind of a funny thing, but like, so in my house we have like a ghost of some sort. I don't know what he is. He's just a ghost. He's not mean. He doesn't scare people. He doesn't do shit like the fucking Black Monk does. But I call him Clarence. You know, it's like you have somebody living in your house, you might as well give him a name type of thing. So I guess Fred maybe, and I kind of see where Fred would come in, because like you said, Fred is not a scary name. Right? It's just like regular dude. And so if you name him Fred, maybe it helps you be a little less afraid of him. You know
Cut
what I mean?
your shit out, Fred.
Right, exactly. Now, Fred's bullshit wasn't always such a dramatic display. There was more of that, for sure, and we will talk about it in a minute. But his usual stuff was making loud banging noises and throwing knickknacks and shit. So that was a pretty common thing with Fred, was just like a lot of loud banging. They call it like, it sounded like drumming a lot of times at night. The other thing he really liked to do was turn the lights off by flipping the main switch on the fuse box, which the fuse box was located in Harry Potter's bedroom. You know, the cupboard under the stairs.
Does he have any idea how long Wi-Fi takes to turn back on?
I mean, you know, he just doesn't care, I don't think.
What a dick.
I know. What a fucking asshole, killing everybody's Wi-Fi like that. But Fred flipped the switch so often that Gene at one point taped it in the on position. And about a half an hour later, the lights went out again. And when she went to look, the tape was gone, just vanished. Like, it wasn't laying on the floor. It wasn't stuck. It was just fucking gone.
She didn't use duct tape.
She used, I can't remember what tape it said, but I'm guessing it was a pretty strong, it was like construction type tape of some sort. So
Gorilla tape or duct tape.
did they have? They had duct tape in the like 68, right?
Mm-hmm.
I would think. Man, anyway. Oh yeah, I feel this is important to point out though. Paranatural PSA: if your main breaker keeps tripping in your house, please call an electrician. Do not just assume that you have a poltergeist because you heard this show. Okay, it could be a sign of something potentially dangerous. So, electrician first, Ghostbuster second. Okay, let's do things in the right order here. Okay, moving on. I don't want anybody's house to go up in flames because they heard fucking this stupid episode about the Black Monk Part 2, and they're like, nope, we got a poltergeist. Tape that bitch on.
Nah, if their house burns down, it's a pyrogeist.
It's a pyrogeist. I like it. We just invented a new ghost. That's what we do here. Now, something else I want to touch on before we go back into the story of Fred's more dramatic actions is this. So in part 1, Marie's friend, Mr. O'Donnell, said that poltergeists were often a manifestation of someone's mind. Now, there is a theory that's still in play today that pretty much says the same thing, but it says a little bit more than he said. And I think we talked about this in Jeff the Talking Mongoose, but I kind of want to go over it again for anyone who hasn't listened to that episode. So the going theory on poltergeist activity is that it manifests from someone's mind, and that someone is generally a pubescent or prepubescent person, and generally, but not always, a female. So whenever poltergeist cases are seen, there's generally a preteen or teenage girl in the house, and they associate it with her, which associating it with her, in my mind, is not the same as blaming her, because how the fuck do you blame somebody for an unintentional manifestation of telekinetic energy?
So I think it's pretty easy to handle that. Either A, kick them out, B, horse tranquilizer, or C, go just
You cannot just axe your teenage daughter because you have a poltergeist.
No. It would be more like Telltale Heart.
Telltale Heart.
Yeah. Underneath the floorboards, all that stuff.
Aha.
Heart apparently still beats. So technically she would be dead. Just in pieces.
Look, there are plenty of other reasons why you may want to do that to your teenage daughter. Let's not make poltergeist one of them.
Make poltergeist one of the big ones.
Anyway.
Saying. Conjuring 3, the devil made me do it.
The teenager made me do it. I don't even have teenagers yet, but I got one that's getting close, and she thinks she's a fucking teenager.
Oh, shiza.
Trust me. So anyway, with the going theory being that it's a preteen or teenage female, all that, Colin Wilson definitely seems to ascribe to this theory and talks about how the activity was never much during the day and says it's probably because Diane was at school. So he does, without expressly saying it, seem to be pointing to Diane as the reason behind the poltergeist activity. But in my opinion, there's a couple things wrong with this. The first one being that Diane was nowhere around the first time shit happened. Mm-hmm. That was Grandma Sarah and Philip were in the house. Diane was some fucking where else, like on holiday with her parents, not even in the town, let alone the house. And as we will cover in part 3, there's still shit happening at 30 East Drive, Pontefract to this day. Diane's not there. Nobody lives in the house. So there's a little teaser there for everybody on what's coming up in part 3, but I don't think it was Diane's doing for those couple of reasons. But anyway, shortly after things kick back off, Philip, being the bright coffee-drinking young man that he is, says, hey, why don't we try an exorcism? And everybody else is like, holy shit, why didn't I think of that? Right? So Vic Kelly makes some calls and gets in touch with the local vicar, the Reverend Davy. Reverend Davy informs them that exorcisms are not something that can just be performed at a moment's notice, that he would have to get permission from the bishop first, and that since there had been some cases where the exorcist was criticized for making things worse, the bishop might just say no. But he did agree to come over at 7 the following Thursday for a visit. Jean made sandwiches and tea and invited Vic and Marie over. They told Reverend Davy about everything that had been happening, and he told them about the rites of exorcism and kind of what happens and things like that. Now, after about an hour and a half, nothing had happened, and Reverend Davy decided it was time to go home. Jean began to apologize for bringing the Reverend out for nothing, but as she spoke, there was a series of loud thumps overhead, and a brass candlestick fell off the mantel. Jean pointed this out as the doing of Mr. Nobody. The Reverend gave it some thought and replied, quote, "I think I know what your problem is. Subsidence," end quote. Now, this was something else I had to look up because I didn't know what the fuck they were talking about. Subsidence, in a nutshell, is when the ground settles underneath a building. And it's something that, like, you can see to an extreme under really big, really old buildings where, like, there's some skyscrapers, like in New York and shit, that have done this. They've actually sunk into the ground so much that they have to build steps from street level down to the entrance, which used to be at street level. It happens. It's like a fairly common thing, really, with bigger buildings especially. But apparently, it was a pretty common occurrence in the area of Pontefract. For whatever reason, the ground there just settled a lot more than normal. So the vicar, Reverend Davy says, well, it's subsidence. Marie responds to his theory by saying, quote, "But subsidence can only make things fall," and she trails off, because a second candlestick lifts off the mantel, floats deliberately across the room, right in front of the vicar's nose, and then drops to the floor. Now, Marie, whose argument was now made for her, said, quote, "Do you think that's subsidence?" End quote.
Yeah, the house is just settling.
The house is
It causes levitation of candlesticks.
Right.
Yeah.
How
We've
about
all
that
been
guy?
there.
I bet that guy felt like an ass. So anyway, then there was a crash, and they all ran into the lounge to see that the china cupboard was tipped over and every cup, saucer, and plate was scattered on the floor.
Dick.
But not a single one was broken.
Undick.
Not so much as a chip or a crack in any of them.
Still a bit of a dick move.
I mean, still, you got to clean it up.
Yeah.
Right. The Reverend Davy had had a change of opinion by this point and told the Pritchards to move before someone got hurt. The Pritchards were not about to be driven out by a ghost, and they said as much to the Reverend Davy, but he did give a final repeat of his warning before he left. Now, in his book, Colin Wilson notes that there is no case on record in which a poltergeist does any sort of great physical harm. And I'm kind of with him there. I've never actually heard of a case where someone got, killed by a poltergeist. People get bruised, they get scratched, they even get bitten. But a poltergeist never just picks up a butcher knife and runs it through somebody's face.
Don't give them ideas, Ben.
I mean, right? Don't give them any ideas. But it hasn't, I've never heard of it, We've heard I've heard of Sasquatch killing people. I've heard of aliens killing people. Demonic possession killing people. Never have I ever heard of a poltergeist actually doing anything more than scratch and bruise type harm.
Yeah.
They destroy a lot of objects.
Dicks.
You dick!
Seen as more of just like a nuisance than a danger.
Right. So, anyway. Now, this whole they don't really kill people theory is held to be true later after the vicar left. So, Diane was going to go up to bed, and she just got to the foot of the stairs when the lights went out. One of Fred's favorite tricks. So, she just stopped and stood there, while Joe looked for a flashlight so that he could get in the cupboard and flip the switch on the fuse box. Now, suddenly, by the street light again, she sees something big moving in the hallway. And the hall stand, which was made of oak and apparently pretty heavy, was levitating in the air and coming toward her. So she tries to like back away from it. And what she does is she actually trips and falls on her ass on the stairs. Right? The stand comes right to her and actually like sits on top of her. And it's the stand and the sewing machine that was sitting on top of it. They both just like floated across the room. She fell and it like presses down on top of her. She tried to push it off, but couldn't. And she said it was as if it weighed a ton. And yet, it wasn't pushing down with the full force of a ton, nor was it pushing down with the full weight of the furniture itself. It was pushing down with just enough force to pin the girl in place. So it was like just doing enough to hold her down.
Like it didn't want to hurt her.
It didn't want to hurt her. It could
just
have.
Wants to scare her.
Yeah. It's like a dick older brother.
I know plenty of that.
Yeah, you've been pinned to the ground by your older brother. Not hard enough to hurt.
And locked in sleeping bags and thrown around. Yeah.
But just like this show of force that says, see how easy I can overpower you.
Yeah.
You know, it's got that kind of feel to it. Like, I want to scare you. I want to prove that I'm powerful, but I'm not going to hurt you. So anyway, the lights come back on and they see Diane and they rush over to try and help her. And Jean, who gets there first, tried to pull the stand off of her daughter and could not budge the goddamn thing. Now, I don't know how big this hall stand was, but straight up, it's just a piece of furniture. You should be able to budge it if it's on an angle on the fucking stairs.
Yeah, at least budget.
Move it, something. But she could not move the goddamn thing. Philip caught up with his mother very quickly, and even with the two of them, the goddamn thing just would not move.
He didn't drink his coffee that morning.
He must not have. It had worn off. It was evening time by now. Now, Jean realizes that Diane is unharmed. And she tells her daughter to lie still and try to relax. Diane did as her mother said, and as soon as she relaxed, she felt the force holding her down change. And they pulled the stand and the sewing machine off of her very easily.
I bet poor little Diane is super claustrophobic now.
I mean, she might be. Dude, she takes kind of a beating throughout this. I'm just, spoiler alert, I will tell you guys that now. So Diane is, of course, shaken up, but unharmed. There was not so much as a single bruise or scratch or scrape or anything on her from this whole fucking incident. Like, it was literally just enough to pin her down. But Mr. Nobody wasn't quite done with Diane yet that night. So Diane gets, she's shaken up and whatever, but she goes to bed. And as soon as her bedroom light was out, her blankets get yanked off the bed and thrown into the corner.
Damn.
And then, in a matter of seconds, her mattress is flipped up in the air and she gets spilled onto the floor and the mattress flops over on top of her ass. Still, nothing that causes harm, but it's like just a dick fucking move. She gets dumped on the floor and the mattress gets laid on her. And that happened 4 more times that night.
Are you kidding me?
With every time just as quick as you can be, blankets ripped, mattress on top. Like, little girl on the floor.
This is going to happen again. It's already happened 3-4 times.
She's pretty stubborn to just keep getting back in that fucking bed. I would have just stayed under the mattress, been like, there, take that, you fucking dick.
Well, I'm a grown-ass adult. If that happened to me once, I would go into my brother's room and sleep.
Scoot over, Derek. We's cuddling.
Or sleep in my truck.
I mean, something. I don't know. But yeah, it happened to her 4 more times that night.
I have to, big dick move, but she's dumb. Stubborn or dumb?
One of the, maybe both. There is a fine line sometimes.
Stubborn.
So after that, Jean, at some point during this period, runs into an acquaintance of hers, a woman named Renee Holden, who was not only Vic Kelly's sister, but was also said to be a bit psychic. Jean tells her what's going on, and she visits the house, and I'm just going to kind of gloss over all this part. She witnessed a lot of what Fred could do during her first visits and was present and bore witness to many things afterward. But it was nothing really remarkable compared to what we have already covered or what we are going to cover shortly. Just shit like the lights going out and shit getting messed up. Pretty much what she saw. But of note, Mrs. Holden did suggest that they try to communicate with the entity. She kind of figured maybe if you can find out who it is and what it wants, it might leave you alone, right? So the Pritchards took her advice. And they wound up standing together in the hallway, in a circle with their hands joined, doing the old seance routine, and concentrating on persuading the poltergeist to manifest itself.
Oh, smart.
Oh, yeah. Fred obliged.
Attaboy, Fred.
But not in the way they wanted. The way that Fred manifested himself was first with a loud sound like wind coming down the stairs, and then by throwing a shower of objects over the banister. And we're talking like everything upstairs that could move, like bedding, boxes, knickknacks, mattresses, just everything just came flying over the rail and just bouncing down the stairs and shit. That's not what they had in mind, and they didn't try that a second time. So
Yeah, at least Jeff the Talking Mongoose would help him clean it up.
Eventually, yeah. And for all, like everything I cover in this, I didn't even put this in here. I'm going to add it now, though, just because you said that. Fred was not all bad. So the one thing that he did was during this second manifestation period, the Pritchard's usual electric bill went from like 20 pounds a month to 10. And Jean Pritchard was such an honest person that she actually called the electric company and was like, hey, how come my electric bill is half what it's supposed to be? And they're like, well, that's what the meter says, so that's what we're charging you. So like Fred maybe was getting in there and turning that fucker back a little bit for him.
Attaboy, Fred.
It's probably literally the only nice thing he does that's mentioned, but he did at least do that.
I mean, I don't think it's worth it, but thanks, Fred.
I mean, it depends on what your electric bill is.
I mean, 10, 20 pounds, though.
Yeah, but in 68, that was like kind of a lot of money.
I don't know what that translates to in real money.
Freedom coin. I mean, at the time, it would have been like 10 or 20 bucks a month, but in 68, that's,
right.
I would guess somewhere around a couple $100 worth of money. That's a guess. That is a total guess. If you know better, fucking let me know, but I'm guessing.
I still don't think it's worth it.
Probably not. Not when you have to buy like new knickknacks and shit all the time because Fred keeps yucking them over the stairs.
And clean up after him all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And get pinned down by him.
Yeah, that part would kind of suck.
A freaking mattress.
Oh, trust me, it gets better.
Good.
So now we come to probably my favorite part of the Black Monk saga, which in my notes is just titled Enter Aunt Maud. Okay. This is by far my favorite part of the story. So Maud Pierce, or from here on out, Aunt Maud, was Joe Pritchard's sister. Okay. And I'm just gonna give this right here, and it might be a little unfair. She really might have been a very lovely person in life, but I cannot help but imagine Aunt Maud as anything but a sourpuss, stuffy old broad. Kind of like an Aunt Petunia from Harry Potter type character. Right?
My favorite.
And like I said, it might be unfair. I don't know. What I do know is that she came to 30 East Drive to investigate the phenomenon for herself. Not because she was interested, but because she felt that such publicity was rather undignified and that there was a logical explanation for all of it. And by logical explanation, what she meant was that Philip and Diane were hoaxing everything and having a laugh at everyone's expense.
Yeah, I don't like her already.
Yeah, so I don't think I'm being too unfair.
No.
Maybe a little. Y'all can decide for yourself.
She sounds like a butt sniffer.
She sounds like a real fucking prude. But. So Joe, for his part, told her that she did not know what she was talking about accusing the kids that way.
Attaboy.
Yep, defend your kids. Philip and Diane were, not pleased to be accused, but they were too polite to be rude to their aunt. But at any rate, Aunt Maud and her attitude came to visit the Pritchard house. And it was wintertime. So she gets there, she comes in, and they sit down by the fireplace in the kitchen. And suddenly, the room goes cold in that telltale manner that meant Fred was around. Then, as per usual, the lights go out. Now, by the glow of the fire, there was just enough to see fairly clearly what happened next. The refrigerator door swung open, and a jug of milk floated out. The jug sailed across the kitchen until it was poised directly over Aunt Maud's head. Then it tilted slowly and deluged her in milk. Attaboy, Fred.
Yeah, Fred don't like Aunt Maud much either.
No, he does not, and it gets better.
Good.
So Aunt Maud jumped to her feet, spluttering through a face full of milk, as Jean found her way to the cupboard under the stairs and flipped the lights back on. Now, Aunt Maud, of course, accused the kids. But Jean told her it wasn't them and that they had been right next to her the whole goddamn time. Aunt Maud was not only pissed, but was also not convinced of the kids' innocence. She started going off about the lights going out beforehand because someone didn't want to be seen doing it and blah, 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 blah. Now, Jean, of course, could understand why Aunt Maud was a bit peeved. She was, after all, standing there covered in milk. But she simply invited Aunt Maud to stay the night and see for herself what else might occur. Aunt Maud accepted the invitation/challenge and began removing her hat and coat to settle in, stay a while. So she gets her hat and coat off and she goes looking for her gloves, but they're nowhere to be found. Now, things disappearing was not an uncommon occurrence in the Pritchard household, and Jean tells her, don't worry about the gloves, they'll turn up. They always do, whatever. And they go into the lounge. The lights once again went out, and there was a loud, violent banging sound accompanied by an indignant yell by Aunt Maud. When the lights were restored, they saw that the chairs had been turned upside down. The electric fireplace the electric fire had been pulled from the fireplace, and the contents of the refrigerator were strewn all over the room. The kids couldn't help but burst out laughing, even as Aunt Maud became more irritated. And Aunt Maud asked, quote, what keeps happening to the lights? And Jean told her something keeps turning them off. Aunt Maud's reply was, you mean someone turns them off. Why don't you lock the cupboard door? Jean told her that they did lock the cupboard door, but it didn't make any goddamn difference. So after this, Fred kind of let him have a quiet evening, and they all turned in early for bed. Now, Jean, Diane, and Aunt Maud took over Philip's bedroom. Philip took Diane's bedroom, and Joe went to sleep in his own damn bed. Seems kind of a convoluted sleeping arrangement. There might have been reasons for it. I don't know what they were. Now, because Fred seems to have a sense of humor, and Aunt Maud was the resident naysayer, stuff got real weird in the girls' room that night. So no sooner did the ladies go to bed, but the reading lamp lifts up off the nightstand, floats slowly across the room, because we all float here, and out the door. Then they all see something moving by the doorway, which turned out to be the 4 small bulbs that produced the glow effect of the electric fireplace. 2 of the bulbs were kind of dancing around the top of the door, and the other 2 were doing the same around the bottom. Then they saw the hands. One enormous hand appeared above the door, and the other appeared about 6 inches from the floor. The ladies stared, momentarily petrified with fear, and maybe justifiably so. But the fear subsided when they realized that what they were looking at was Aunt Maud's missing fur-lined gloves. That would be kind of freaky, man. Just hands appear in the dark out of fucking nowhere. And you got to give them credit, like, from the top of the door or above the door to, like, the floor, that's like a good 6-foot wingspan.
Yeah.
On whoever was wearing them gloves. So that's kind of a big dude. But anyway, realizing that it was her gloves, Aunt Maud, who was of an evangelical religious bend, pointed at the gloves, said sternly, "Go away, you're evil," and hucked one of her boots at the doorway. The gloves vanished. And Jean couldn't help but get a dig in by asking, quote, "Do you still think it's the kids doing it?" End quote. So good for you, Jean. Good on you. But then the gloves reappeared and were floating into the bedroom. One of them began making a beckoning gesture as if it wanted them to follow. None of them did because, according to what Jean said later, they were too scared. But since they wouldn't follow, one of the gloves curled into a fist and shook threateningly in Aunt Maud's direction. He really did not like Aunt Maud. Aunt Maud responded to this threat by bursting out in song. She started singing "Onward Christian Soldiers" at the top of her lungs. Fred was unperturbed by this, and instead of fleeing from the name of Christ or what have you, he started using the gloves as hands to conduct Aunt Maud's singing.
You dick!
Which is fucking both a dick move and hilarious as hell.
Just waiting for one of those fingers to pop up.
Oh, man,
in the
that
middle
would've
of that glove.
Dude, I think that was even better than throwing up a bird, dude. Just like, yep, go ahead and sing. Da 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 da. I'm gonna conduct you. Anyway, Jean admitted that she, like us, found this pretty goddamn funny, right? So she didn't laugh, but she said she couldn't help but smile at this, right? Now, eventually, Fred got tired of fucking with Aunt Maud, and the gloves disappeared again. And Aunt Maud said decisively, quote, "You've got the devil in this house," end quote. Now, none of them really slept the rest of that night, and Aunt Maud left the next morning saying that she wouldn't stay there again for 20,000 pounds, which is quite a bit of money, you know. Now, later on, Jean actually found Aunt Maud's gloves, like in the bottom of a cupboard, where they had really no business being, but she did find them, and returned them to Aunt Maud. Aunt Maud absolutely refused to touch them. And what she did was she picked them up with a pair of coal tongs, carried them outside, threw them on the trash heap, and burnt those motherfuckers. So that's the story of Aunt Maud. That's probably like one of my favorite parts. But now, for the most part, anything that Fred did was pretty typical stuff for a poltergeist, right? We've talked about him making messes and making noises and moving stuff and whatever, which is all pretty typical stuff. And it's got a lot of shades of like Jeff the Talking Mongoose in it, which is why I kind of like, they kind of called Jeff a poltergeist, I think, is why everybody thinks he was that, because it's typical poltergeist stuff. However, there was something that Fred could do that was really pretty rare. Colin Wilson calls it interpenetration of matter.
That doesn't sound good. We're matter.
Huh?
Technically, we're matter.
I mean, true. But yeah, that's what he calls it, interpenetration of matter. And since I can't think of a better name...
But it kind of sounds sexual, so I'll roll with it.
I'll roll with it. Now, essentially, what interpenetration of matter means is that Fred could either move shit through other shit, or he could, like, bip shit out of our dimension to a different dimension and then back into our dimension. One of those two things was happening. But here's the example. One evening, the Pritchards were sitting in the lounge when an egg floated in from the kitchen, positioned itself very carefully in the air, and then fell on the floor. When it busted, the room was filled with the scent of flowers. Like the scent of a garden full of flowers. When another egg did the same thing, Jean ran into the kitchen, grabbed all the eggs out of the fridge, and put them in a wooden box. Then she sat her ass down on the lid of said box. Okay? But as she's sitting there, another egg materializes in midair and explodes like a scent bomb. A really messy scent bomb. Egg yolk scent bomb. Jean jumps up and looks in the box, and sure as shit, one of the eggs was missing. But she sits down again on the lid of the box. And yep, another egg. And this continued until all the eggs were gone and the box was empty, despite the fact that after that first time, Jean never got off the box again. She sat there while eggs appeared out of nowhere, burst, and then repeat.
All of them flower smell?
All of them. Yeah, she sat on the box the whole time, and the eggs still just appeared and burst.
That just makes no fucking sense. I mean, it's just bullshit.
I'd start hard boiling all my eggs.
Well, like, it's weird because, like, how do you get them out of the fucking box?
Interdimensional travel?
It could be. I don't honestly know. There's not a real... It's just so fucking weird. That's one that I have never heard of anywhere else. Like, when you know so specifically that the thing is in the box but it comes out anyway.
I mean, when you were talking about the gloves just appearing,
it kind of hints at it.
Yeah, that kind of what popped in my mind.
But in that situation, like, I could even see where the gloves would just kind of move out of the room so fast that you didn't really see them move, but, you know, that's kind of what's happening. This is very specifically shit going from one location to another with no explanation in our understanding of physics how.
That's true. Go Fred.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just a really interesting part of the story. I can't wrap my head around it.
He seems like he's a dick just to be a dick.
A lot of the times, yes.
Yeah.
And like, Colin Wilson talks about how juvenile he seemed to be.
Yeah. Like Aunt Maud, the conducting.
It's funny, but it's a dick move.
Oh, it's hilarious. And then the eggs, like, get them out now. Okay.
Well, see, in his book, I didn't put this in here, but we're kind of on it, so I'm going to talk about it. In his book, Colin Wilson talks about Fred being kind of juvenile, and he talks about a lot of the other shit that he did. A lot of it seemed to be just to make a fucking mess. And Gene kept a very tidy house. But Fred would do shit like burst the eggs on the floor, knock shit over. At one point, he apparently went around the entire house and put jam on all the doorknobs. Just for no goddamn reason. He just did shit to make a mess.
Dick to be a dick.
Yeah, just to be a dick. And in his book, Colin Wilson kind of speculates and wonders what might have happened if Gene Pritchard had not kept such a tidy house and had not gone to such lengths to clean up all the shit Fred did. If he would have just quit. And it's an interesting thought. We'll never know the answer to it, but it's an interesting thought. But yeah, he was just a childish little dick that just ran around making fucking messes for no goddamn reason. Anyway, Vic Kelly. He was a good Catholic boy. And he wasn't convinced that an exorcism wasn't the answer to their problem. So he went to his priest, Father Hudson. Now, Father Hudson told Vic that an exorcism wasn't guaranteed to work on a poltergeist and might actually make things worse. And he kind of seemed to be speaking from some experience here. He added that on top of that, he too would have to get permission from the bishop and go through all the channels and do all that nonsense. And then he said something to Vic that's just fucking dumb. Okay? He told Vic that there was no rule against Vic himself sprinkling some holy water and saying some prayers. And that if an exorcism was going to work, there was no reason that a layman shouldn't be able to pull one off. Now,
okay, says nobody ever.
Actually says a few people, and I will remind you. You remember Father Bob?
Mm-hmm.
From the Hinsdale house? Who kind of did the same shit? Like a half-assed exorcism? Yeah, same thing. Vic did a half-assed exorcism. And now I'm not of the opinion that it takes a priest. And yes, anybody can do it, but you have to understand what you're doing.
Right.
You have to know what you're dealing with. You have to know what you're going about, and you have to have the will and conviction to do it. Right? Vic lacked something in there. And just like Father Bob, he really pissed Fred off. So the night that Vic did that, Fred decided to keep everybody up all night drumming and destroying shit. And the next day, a crucifix that was on the mantle flew off the mantle and stuck itself to the back of Diane's neck. Now, it didn't hit her hard. In fact, when it hit her, she just felt it land on her, and she was like, what the fuck is on my neck? And that's when she's like, Gene saw the crucifix and whatever. Gene couldn't get the fucker to pull off. It's described as like Diane was a magnet, and the crucifix, which was actually made of brass, was like iron, and it was just stuck to her fucking neck. Now, because he couldn't get it off, Diane kind of panicked, right? And she goes running out into the hallway. And when she does, a picture of Jesus that was hanging on the wall at the end of the hallway falls off and hits the floor, and the cross simultaneously falls off Diane's neck and lands against the wall. Now, like I said, the cross did not hit her with any sort of force. But still, Diane had a cross-shaped red mark on her back for a few days afterwards. So yeah, they pissed him off. Now, on Easter Sunday, which was shortly after this, Gene came downstairs in the morning to find that someone, aka Fred, had painted upside down gold crosses on all the doors. The crosses were very crisp, as if put on with a stencil, and the lack of brush marks indicated that they had been put on with spray paint. Now, Jean remembered that Philip had bought some gold spray paint to use on his bicycle, so she went hunting for the can and found it in the shed outside. And she brought it back in and tried to recreate the crosses herself, but whatever finish was on the doors was real glossy and slippery and shit, and did not take well to spray paint. So what she wound up with was just a runny, like, mess on the door, where these crosses were very, very crisp and clean. The paint matched, but she could not get it to spray as clean as Fred could, apparently. He's a very talented spray painter. You're shaking your head. Share your thoughts, my friend.
Just a dick.
Yes, it's just a dick, just messing everything up.
Yeah.
Now, because things had now taken on kind of a demonic undertone, Jean consulted the local vicar. He came to the house with another clergyman in tow. And the two of them looked at the crosses and told Jean just leave them there until after Easter. And they said they would consider the matter and come back after the holiday. Neither of the two ever showed up again. So
Sweethearts.
They were absolutely no fucking help. Then there was the incident with the keys. So one morning, Jean was getting ready to clean out the flue in the kitchen fireplace. And she's knelt down in front of the fireplace when all of a sudden a shower of keys came down the chimney. Some of them bounced off her head, but most of them just kind of landed in the fireplace. Once it stopped, she gathered up the keys and they counted them, and there were 19 keys in all, which was literally every key that everyone had in the house, plus one. So they get the keys sorted out, and there was one that nobody recognized. And apparently it was an odd-looking key that they never did figure out where it came from or what it went to. And the book is copyright 1993. And as of the time that Colin Wilson wrote it, Jean Pritchard still had that weird little key. Like, she kept it. So now I don't remember if I mentioned this earlier, but the second round of activities took place in an approximately 9-month period. So from the time things kicked back off again to the time they stopped, it was about 9 months. And during this period, there was stuff happening pretty much daily. Mostly it was a little shit that I'm skipping over, like the noise making all the time or just the general messiness of Fred or what have you. So I'm skipping a lot of that stuff, just the mundane stuff. But I do want to make it clear that it was every day. It was a lot of activity. So much activity that people would come and camp out in front of the Pritchard's house, just trying to experience something. And a lot of these people heard shit or saw something through the windows or what have you. And the story grew to the point where they actually heard the bus driver, so the city bus driver, going by their house, slow down, and he announced their place as the haunted house. So that's how big this story got in a 9-month period. Plus, there were more newspaper articles written and things like that. So it was a pretty big fucking story at the time. And I just kind of want to make it clear that there's a lot of little shit that gets left out of this story.
Mm-hmm.
But now, it wasn't until things were nearing the end that Fred actually showed himself. The first time was to Joe and Jean. They were lying in bed one night when the door suddenly swung open. Now, of course, they both looked at the door opening, and what they saw was a dim figure in the doorway. It was tall and had a hood over its head. Now, when they flipped the switch on, the light switch, it vanished. Just gone. They did not get a great look at it. But that was the first time anybody saw it. The next person to see Fred was the Pritchard's neighbor, Mrs. May Mountain. Now, something else that gets kind of left out of most of the story was that throughout all of this 9-month period, May Mountain had experiences too. Shit had happened in her house. Nothing as aggressive or dramatic as the shit that happened in the Pritchard's house. But she regularly heard like the drumming that came from nowhere and the bangs and shit like that, and would have things move once in a while. So it was littler stuff, but it was happening just as frequently. So apparently Fred just thought the whole building was his to play ground in, like a little selfish bastard. Anyway, one morning, so note that it's in the morning when this happens. May Mountain was standing at her kitchen sink when she had the unmistakable feeling that someone was behind her. She was home alone and hadn't heard anyone come in. But her first thought was that it was her nephew who had snuck in to make her jump. Apparently that was the thing he did. Now, assuming it was her prankster nephew, she said, quote, "Oh, give over," and turned around. May Mountain found herself not looking at a beloved nephew, but instead at a tall figure dressed in a black monk's habit with a cowl pulled up over its head, covering its face. Mid-morning, May Mountain got a real good look at Fred. Like, a real good look.
Yeah.
She went on to say that the figure looked solid, and yet she felt no fear. She felt more curiosity than anything. And then the figure just vanished. Yeah. But that's why we call him the Black Monk of Pontefract now. Because that's what he looked like to May Mountain. Someone dressed in a black monk's habit. Now, others would see the same figure. Sometimes in part and sometimes in whole. And like I said, that's how he became known as the Black Monk of Pontefract, or just the Black Monk. Now, the climax of things was when one evening Diane went into the kitchen to make coffee, and of course, the lights went out. Now, as Jean was getting the lights back on, Diane screamed. Now, it was just about dusk, and there was still enough light to see by. And so when Diane screamed, Jean and Philip went right to her, and they could see everything that was happening. And what they found was Diane being dragged up the stairs. And they could see that her sweater was stretched out like somebody was pulling on it. And apparently Fred's other hand, the one that wasn't pulling on her sweater, was around Diane's throat.
Oh.
Yeah, and Diane was fucking panicking, losing her goddamn mind, because this was the first time that, like, Fred had actually touched her. He'd, like, thrown shit at her, and he'd stuck shit to her, and he'd done all that. It's the first time he'd ever, like, laid hands on her. So she was freaking the fuck out. Jean and Philip, of course, run up the stairs, and they try to pull Diane away, but they were only successful when Philip had the idea to grab for the invisible assailant instead of for his sister. So Philip was like, I'm going to grab Fred instead of Diane. And the minute he thought that, he never even made the grab, Fred let go. And the three of them, like, tumbled their asses back down the stairs. Diane, like I said, was significantly more freaked out than normal. And she actually, afterwards, they saw red finger marks on her neck. And she was given a large glass of brandy in order to calm her down that night.
She deserves it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't care if she is like fucking 14 or whatever. Yeah, you can, here, have a drink, calm the fuck down. The last time that they actually saw Fred was one day when Diane and Philip were in the lounge watching TV. And Philip saw the shape of someone on the other side of the frosted glass door that led to the kitchen and dining room. Which, when he looked, Diane looked and saw the same thing. Now, because it, like I said, people have been camping out in their yard and shit, so whatever. Their first thought was that somebody had actually come in unannounced. So Philip gets up and he goes and he opens up the door. And what he sees is the figure of the Black Monk disappearing into the floor. Like, just melting into the floor. After this, a friend of Joe Pritchard's, who had just gotten back from a trip to Scotland, told Joe that the crofters in Scotland hung garlic from their doors and windows in order to keep spirits out. Yeah, go ahead.
Poltergeist?
Vampirgeists. Which, of course, just like us, the Pritchards had heard of that for vampires, but had never heard of it having wider applications.
Yeah.
But still, they're kind of desperate, so Philip volunteered immediately to go down to the store and get some goddamn garlic. And he did, and they hung it from all the doors and windows, which apparently made the house smell, very garlicky. Duh.
Huh. I was thinking flowers.
I mean, but whether it was the garlic or just things coming to a natural break or what, I guess that's up for debate. But after they hung the garlic, things stopped. Things just stopped. My theory is that actually Fred's feelings were hurt because the Pritchards didn't want him around and they were trying to get rid of him, so he just went and sulked somewhere. But whatever the case, after they hung the garlic, that was the end of things. So, at least for the Pritchard family, but not so much for 30 East Drive itself, which is the subject for part 3 next week. So what do you think, Jacob?
Fred just seems like a dick. I don't care if they hurt his feelings. Probably shouldn't be grabbing people and hucking stuff and making messes.
I mean, I'm saying like a lot of that shit, yeah, you could overlook, but the minute you're trying to drag the little girl up the stairs and choking her, you got to go, buddy.
Yeah.
I mean, he was pushing it on a lot of the other things, but nope, that's it. You got to go.
Yeah. And they could see the hand around her throat?
No, they couldn't see the hand around her throat at all.
Okay.
But they could see her sweater being pulled on, and she could feel the hand around her throat. I don't think Jean and Philip really realized that part was going on until later, like when they saw the red marks and she told him, he was choking me.
Garlic.
Garlic.
Never
I mean,
heard
hey,
of that
who knew?
before.
Who knew?
Well, I mean, if it works, I ate enough garlic to where I know I'm never going to be messed with. Well, closely.
I don't know if eating it does the same trick, but
Oh, I reek of it.
I mean, maybe. Who knows?
Aha, ghost.
Yeah, personally, I don't think it was the garlic that did it.
You think his feelings were hurt?
No, that's just kind of a joke theory. I think that because by evidence of the first occurrence, so that the house was not brand new. The Pritchards were not the first family to live there when things kicked off the first day, but they kicked off and then went dormant for 2 years. So there was a dormant period, a kickoff, a dormant period,
right?
A 9-month period.
He probably got tired again.
Yeah, maybe ran out of energy or whatever it is that he feeds on. I don't know.
Yeah, since he did
but I
cut
feel like
the
it was
electric bill.
Yeah, but I feel like it's more of a natural cyclical thing. But who knows?
I mean, yeah. Try it on your ghost.
Hang some damn garlic around.
Yeah.
Oof. I like good smells. I have non-pungent ways to get rid of spooky specters.
All you gotta do is spray it with some Old Spice.
Not the new stuff, the old stuff.
That's right.
Just get some Brute aftershave and sprinkle it around.
Yeah, just soak the garlic cloves in that and hang them up.
There you go. That'll do her. Jesus God, what a smell. I know for sure I wouldn't haunt my house. I wouldn't come home. Oh, goddamn. All right, buddy boy, you got anything else to add?
No, I'm excited for part 3.
All right, then. I will, as always, say thank you guys so much for listening. We really hope you are enjoying this, and if you are, please don't forget to tell a friend, share the show, all that good stuff. And until next week, good night.
Oh, good night. My apologies. If you like these 2 or 3 parters, let us know.
Yeah, let us know what you guys think. If you like the one-offs or the longer forums or both. Yeah, let us know. Get in the Facebook group or email us, whatever. All right. Good night.
Good night. Guilt trip, guilt trip, guilt trip, guilt trip.